Wigan Pier tape packs and donk to kids in Nova SIs to drive around and listen to. Hi, my name is James Fox. I DJ under that name. I've released records under that name. I have an Instagram account and also a YouTube account by the name of Night Loving or Night Loving Music, where I talk about records, post about records, share records I like, that I found, and that sort of thing. Moved to Nottingham about 6 years ago. Before that I lived in Bristol, London and Manchester. I'm originally from a small town just outside Manchester called Rosendale. Collecting records, I say I probably started in around 2000, give or take. I've been buying records or music since I was probably 9 years old. But I think the actual collecting part of it came in probably 2000, 2001. I got my first set of decks, and yeah, I haven't looked back since. It's been a wild ride. I'm still loving it as much as I did even back then, so that's always a good sign. Ooh, well, probably something like 2000, give or take. I think my Discogs collection, I think I last updated maybe a couple of years ago, and that was about 1800. I've bought a lot since then, it's fair to say. So I'm going to say about 2000. I think there's still some in the cellar, in boxes as well. But yeah, about that. I don't know. I mean, there's definitely places where I've been to dig or to pull records out where I've found amazing things, or records that I've kind of kept around for a long time or anything like that. I think probably something like that would be a place in Burnley, near where I grew up, a shop called Astonishing Sounds, which is a pretty small shop, it's fair to say, but it's been there for a long time, perhaps surprisingly, considering that, obviously a record shop in Burnley you might not think would be able to stick around, but I think they sort of weathered the storm in the kind of mid-2000s by selling like Wigan Pier tape packs and donk.
You know what you want to do with that, right?
To kids in Nova SIs to drive around and listen to. But yeah, I mean, I suppose that's where it kind of started for me, probably just kind of realising that there were records under the racks that were mysterious and dusty and kind of a bit tatty. But I think that's really where sort of pulling those out and going and finding treasure. You know what I mean? Things that maybe were worth a bit of more money, or perhaps were rare or unusual, or it almost felt like you were sort of, this sounds quite cynical, but not getting one over the owner, but you were sort of discovering something, secret and unknown. So I think that's probably, in terms of digging, that's where it probably started for me, I would say. Well, yeah, I mean, there's been so many. I mean, different sort of times, different periods of my life. Different record shops have kind of played a big part in that. I would say Astonishing Sounds is one of the first ones where I really got into sort of like digging, as you would call it. And it's a really unique shop because you'll get a really weird mix of people. Like, as I say, people who kind of buy the donk tape packs or whatever. But then I remember being there once, and there was the owner. I think he's called Neil, proper Burnley bloke. You know what I mean? He's sort of mid-50s, whatever. And he sort of pulled out a sort of box of like incredibly rare, like reggae sevens. And there was these two old guys who came in like wearing flat caps. You would think they'd be down the local drinking bitter, but they were just like going through these boxes, and the knowledge they were dropping was just like, you wouldn't really necessarily think of a guy in a flat cap from Burnley as being this like expert on like reggae sevens and like really rare dubs and stuff. But they were just having this conversation. I was just like, wow, this is really unusual, but pretty cool, I think, to sort of see those worlds collide in that way. But I guess after that, I would say probably the Vinyl Exchange in Manchester has been a real, fixture, I suppose, the whole time. It's still going strong. I mean, I'm pretty sure the same people who worked there when I first started going there and buying, music records in, sort of 1991, whatever, 6, 4, 5, I'm not quite sure. I think it's still got the same staff, which is quite comforting in a way to see that they're still there. It hasn't changed, they haven't decorated really, it still smells the same. But yeah, I mean, again, that's another place where you sort of go in there and there's just so much unknown music with all these little sales notes that are just like, you know, you're just like, what is this? What is this thing? You know, and you get really, like, and I got really, you know, inspired by this, just sort of picking these records up and not knowing what they were, like where they were from, you know, like who listens to this, who plays this record, what is it, where is it from, you know. But then after that, I'd say there was a couple of other Manchester record shops that were, you know, really important. Obviously, you have your Eastern Bloc, Piccadilly. Although I never really bought too much in Piccadilly, it's always a good record shop to check out. There was one called Reflex Records that when I sort of started going out more in Manchester, having bought my decks in 2001, finished university, started going out more in Manchester. There was a shop called Reflex. My friend Nick worked there, you know, I really got the sort of first taste of that relationship where you have somebody behind the counter who you know, who knows what you like, who pulls things out for you and says, have you heard this? Do you know what I mean? That kind of like relationship, which obviously is really what I want from a record shop a lot of the time, you know, where you've got somebody who knows your taste and kind of like says, oh, there was this, like, we got 3 copies of this, it's really rare, I saved one for you. And you're like, oh man, thanks. You check it out and it's amazing, do you know what I mean? So that was really quite a formative experience, having that kind of relationship. But beyond that, I'd say there's a few in London. My dad's from London, so I used to spend quite a lot of time down there. You know, I remember going into like, you know, Black Market or Phonica in the kind of like, you know, early 2000s. And it was that really kind of stereotypical, feeling a bit intimidated, you know, guy behind the counter is a bit moody, that kind of vibe. But at the same time, you're just like, wow, this is this unknown world to explore. Do you know what I mean? That really sort of, that sense of there being, well, having a sense of curiosity about what these records were on the wall that you'd never seen before, you know. Yeah, I mean, apart from that, I mean, places like Honest John's, I think that's probably one of my favourite record shops, I would say even now, or especially now, because I think you can really go in there and if they've got something that they recommend, you can probably buy it without listening to it because you know it's going to be worthwhile. It's going to be, you know, it's going to be an interesting, substantial record. Do you know what I mean? So apart from that, I'd say another one that's maybe not quite so well known is probably a place called Allen's Records in East Finchley, which is a bit off the beaten track, or was a bit off the beaten track. I think it's become a bit more like known now. But I remember going in there for the first time, probably a bit later on, sort of mid-2000s or maybe a bit later. And the guy that calls you sir and makes you a cup of tea, and you're just like, oh man, this is very different to going into like Black Market and being like feeling a bit intimidated. You know what I mean? So there's that. I mean, there's so many. I think you know, in Nottingham currently, I've got a real soft spot for Langley Mill Records. I know that in the previous video, Mark said the same thing. I think you know, it's probably got a bit more expensive in recent years, but I think the first couple of times I went in there, you always come out with a massive pile of unknown things, which again kind of feeds into that idea of going into a record shop and going, there's a lot to discover here. You know, there is hidden treasure. If you make the effort, you'll be rewarded, which I think is what I really enjoy from a record shop. Oh yeah, and one other one as well, I would say another London shop would be the Soul and Dance Exchange in Notting Hill. And their bargain basement. I think there's one in Soho as well, where again you go in there and there's just records everywhere, and they're a pound, you know, and you're just like, wow, okay, let's see what we can find. And for me, that's the real, that sort of curiosity is quite important for me in terms of music. I always try and maintain that sense of curiosity about, you know, what's in this box under the counter, or what does this record sound like, or, you know, what can I find here, what can I discover. I think that's really what drives my kind of, you know, my love for music, I would say. The curiosity of always knowing there's something incredible to discover, you know, just around the corner or just in the next box or the next rack. Island and like soca and calypso here. Jazz funk, house across the middle here. I think all this is house actually. Then like the slightly awkwardly named boogie post disco US 80s club section, which is there, like 70s disco. And then other bits down here that don't quite fit in, so like ambient electronic, some Brazilian records, synth pop, that kind of thing. So much stuff. I'll tell you what I'll play. Okay, so play this. Ronnie Benjamin. I think Too Late is the one that I usually play, but the other side's really good as well. I think it's a label from maybe the US Virgin Islands, I think it is possibly. It says here on the back of the record. Yeah, that's right, recorded in the US Virgin Islands. It's just a really beautiful, almost kind of like lo-fi kind of DIY soul record. Yeah, so what's the beep? I might play this as well, which is by George Duke. Great cover. Again, a record you see and go, this is going to be good. I mean, look at his kimono. Do you know what I mean? So this is another jazz funk record, again heavy on the funk, by Ronnie Laws. It's called All For You. Now this is a record that I see all the time in the sort of pound bin, or the cheap bin. And it's probably the best pound record I've ever bought, because it's just so groovy and so powerful, and yeah, it's just a really great record. Yeah, I'll play this from the start. But I'm going to play a new record, which is by Ruthven, who is, I think he's actually a firefighter from South London, but he is also a singer and a songwriter and a producer and a musician who releases on the Paul Institute, which is the label run by A.K. Paul and J. Paul. I'm a huge fan of J. Paul, yeah, huge fan of his, but his records are very hard to come by, unfortunately. They're all very rare and very difficult to buy. But this is on that label, and it's probably one of my favourite songs of the past, I don't know, X number of years. It's just, yeah, it's like, I don't want to say it's like Prince, because obviously Prince is incomparable, but that's the kind of, you know, zone we're getting into, I would say. Okay, so next we have Reel to Reel, Love Me Like This, which I think is probably my favourite record of this kind, you know, kind of mid-80s boogie, funk, whatever you want to call it. Yeah, let's give it a spin. So I think this was actually, I came across this a while ago, well, a long while ago now, the first release by a guy called Floating Points in 2000 and whatever it was, sampled this. So obviously heard that, loved it, tried to work out where the sample was from, and came across this, which is, to be fair, much better. The Floating Points version is good, and a different take, but you can't beat the original. No way. There's too many records. There's too many records I can play. So this is the worst record on my shelves. I don't tend to keep records that I'm not really sure about or whatever, but this one, I bought it for the A side, which is by David Byron. It's called African Breeze. It's like a really nice kind of, almost kind of Giorgio Moroder-esque sort of space disco record. But on the B side, we have Legs Larry Smith with Springtime for Hitler, which I think is from a musical. maybe like I can't remember the guy's name, but a sort of like comedy musical about Hitler. So this is the worst record in my collection by a long, long distance because it's terrible. But the A-side's amazing, but the B-side's terrible.
Wow.
Yeah. Not sure what to say about that one, but the A-side is really good. Just to make that extra clear, I bought this for the other side. The other worst record is a worst record in a slightly different way because it's actually a really good record, which is by the First Cousins Jazz Ensemble. It's just a really deep, like jazz funk sort of affair from 1977. Some really great players on the record, like James Gadson, a really great drummer. But the music consultant is Bill Cosby, which obviously makes it slightly questionable. I've really wrestled with this, with the, you know, the moral dilemma of keeping this record on the shelves because obviously Bill Cosby is a piece of shit. Sorry, I swore. Hope you can beat that out. Bill Cosby is a huge piece of shit, but it's a really good record. So yeah. Okay, so my favourite record to play out, I would say, is the Underground Goodies mix of Brighter Days. Everyone knows it. It's a pretty well-known record, I would say. But having played it out a few times, every time, it just takes the energy level in the room and just like pushes it up every single time. Just super stripped back, percussive, big vocal hook, perfect club record. Cannot miss with this.
Have you got any memories of playing it anywhere in particular?
Yeah, actually. I played in Strasbourg in France a few years ago, kind of pre-COVID, on a boat called, I think it was called Le Raffio, I think it was called the name of the club. And yeah, really great little venue, low ceiling, big sound system, crowd are super up for it. Kind of played this at peak time and just... Yeah, I mean, there's certain records where, as I say, when you play them in a club at the right time, and you just feel the energy in the room just kind of like lift, like a sort of, you know, like that. And yeah, this record is that for me, I would say. So the most obscure and the rarest record is here in the Island, Soca, etc. section, which is this. Which is by Sonic Salvation Band, which is a Jamaican gospel kind of funk outfit called Sonic Salvation Gospel Band. Not on Discogs, not on the internet really, not anywhere. But yeah, really, really deep and really, I don't want to say amateurish, but kind of charmingly so. Do you know what I mean? It's clearly not been recorded in a big expensive studio. But it's all the better for it, you know. It's really kind of direct and intimate sounding and just a really nice record. But yeah, really rare. And yeah, it doesn't exist anywhere that I can find. So I'm trying to remember which is the best track on here. I think it would be, let me see. Let the Gospel Ring, track 2. So we'll give that a quick spin. But there's also this other one as well, which I will pull out, which is down here, in this slightly awkward corner. Just 1 second. Which is this one, which is by a group called Tammy. I guess you would call them that. And this is I guess an R&B record, you would call it, from 1990, by a group who, I think this is their only release. And yeah, it's just, I'll play it for you. It's just a really sort of, I don't know, it's hard to describe. Let me just put this on. So this is the club mix, although I'm not really sure it's much of a club tune. This is the club mix apparently. There we go. Yeah, I mean, there's probably two main records that spring to mind. I think the first one is a record by a band called Kick Partners, who were a sort of synth pop kind of band, I would say, in the sort of maybe mid to late 80s, I think they did like a John Peel session. And I think their first release, or one of their early releases, wasn't synth pop. It was this incredible like deep roots reggae record called Steelworkers, which was about the sort of striking steelworkers in. I'll have to double check where that was. But it was obviously quite a politically charged record. But yeah, just incredibly deep, powerful roots reggae, like really unexpected. But yeah, really a really special record that I think is quite rare as well. I haven't seen another copy for sale, in Nottingham or online. But hopefully I will find some more soon because I want to, try and promote it as best I can because it's really, really powerful. Now hopefully this is going to be the right speed. Let's have a look. So yeah, get a bit there. And the second one, obviously, being quite into house music, and especially sort of 90s house music, I would say you've got the whole DIY crew. There's so much to discover in their catalogue, back catalogue, and I haven't really, even really begun to sort of, explore the finer points of it, I would say. But there is one record by a guy called DJ Profile, which I think is actually Charles Webster, under an alias, which is this really beautiful, spacey, tripping sort of deep house record. I would say those are the two sort of main records I would have in mind. Look at that, beautiful.
Already there.
So organised. So this is on DIY, and the track I'm going to play is by DJ Profile, aka Charles Webster. It's a really nice kind of deep house record. Which side is it on? So that's the B side. Yeah, so it's the B one. Wow, that's a big question. Why are records important to me? Okay, I guess, for a few reasons. I'd say the main reason is, life can be, especially the older you get, the more stressful life becomes, and there's times where, life is just like an Excel spreadsheet, chores, obligations, but then you put on a record or a certain record and you realise there's just so much more to life and to the world than this like narrow, this narrow context that you find yourself in. So I guess for me, it's about escapism, I would say, in a lot of ways, and just a reminder that, there is beauty out there. And a lot of times you'll find that on a record. I think as well, just to sort of mention what I said before in terms of curiosity, I think trying to kind of take that same mindset of the curiosity about discovering the music into your life on a wider level. I think that's important as well. I think you need to retain that and try not to be cynical, I would say. Just keep an open mind and always trying to find new experiences, new people to meet, or new things to enjoy. I think as well, sharing music as well is a really great feeling. I'd say anytime I kind of do a DJ mix, play a DJ set, post on social media about a record. It's really about saying, this record makes me feel this way. I want you to feel this way. It makes me feel happy or free or excited or something. And I think sharing that is an important thing, because, trying to make the world a bit of a better place, maybe, I don't know, some small way, maybe that's the goal for me, I would say.